This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, and thank you to all of you for sparing your time today, Sunday morning, to listen to the introduction to the Pitch Bootcamp program that we intend to run towards the end of the month for 4 days. Just as an introduction, I will be introducing to you the program. But just before that, just wanted to check with you two questions. Is getting capital necessary to realize your business idea? And is capital difficult to get? In my experience with entrepreneurs over the last 15 years, I've always found that all entrepreneurs have a tendency to say that capital is a necessary condition to realize their business dreams, and capital is difficult to get. It is my intention to demonstrate to you that acquisition of capital is a journey, and if we prepare right, the probability of getting capital to realize the business becomes an easy task. The broad presentation is certainly going to have an introduction. I'm then going to introduce you to the business of investors, the business that investors actually do, to see how that influences their constraints in giving capital to startup entrepreneurs. I will then look at the funnel by which entrepreneurs go through as they capture the attention of investors to the time investors take a decision. How does that funnel change over time? I will then focus a little bit that within the constraints of the funnel, where we have too many entrepreneurs seeking funds to very few entrepreneurs who actually get funds, how does one catch the attention of investors, communicate to them the business idea, and making them see it from the entrepreneur's perspective? By which an entrepreneur hooks the investor's thought process is a critical element, in which the communication of the business in a succinct, short way is a very critical variable. Then focus on how investors evaluate teams, the market opportunity, how we can communicate to them the value of the customer problem that we are going to solve, and therefore the opportunity that we have in serving customers. And then we'll focus upon how do we define a product which enables investors to appreciate what we are doing. Then the power of traction of a business, how the acquisition of customers is happening to demonstrate the growth potential of the business. And then we'll focus on traction. Traction metrics are very, very critical, and we'll get into some nuanced detail here. And then the idea of how to communicate a business model, the investment that we are seeking and how it will be used. And then I'll give you a brief overview of the art of the pitch boot camp that we intend to run. At the outset, I wish to share with you as to why you should be even listening to me. Who am I? Well, I'm a IIT engineer. I have an MBA from IIM Bangalore, and I've got a DBA from Case Western in America. But in between, in my first position after the MBA, I became a CEO in '91. This is a company that I took public, the Waterways. Then I came to Dubai. I ran a retail company, got immersed with customer-oriented consumer businesses. And then I went to America for 4 years. When I returned, I ran the government of Dubai's entrepreneurship development agency called Dubai SME, where I ran a business incubator as well as invested in 42 seed stage investments. And it is at this stage that I learned a lot of ideas that I'll be sharing with you. Then I was back in the consumer focused commercial businesses, at which stage I have established now two companies in the last 15 years. Between the two companies, I've done about three businesses. Predominantly, one is an executive education business, which is the Smart Global company, which is now being completely digitized. And during that journey, I have now created a angel network investment management platform, which is currently being implemented at two locations. Broadly, in the last 3 years, I've completely transformed myself into a technology person, not a person who does coding, but who is able to visualize and experience how technology can make everything more efficient and effective. So, in summary, I know how to use technology to achieve business results. In the course of the last 5 years, I've created an entire startup hub in which there are quite a few platforms which are free to use. I have a platform called Incubator, which is essentially a digital platform where any entrepreneur wishing to start a business can come and self-incubate the business. All the tools that are required to incubate a business and knowledge resources are embedded in the platform. I have another platform called Be Investable, where any entrepreneur wishing to seek capital from investors can prepare his company to seek external capital. This is a very important variable because taking capital from an external party imposes not only restrictions but responsibilities and accountabilities on an entrepreneur, and there needs to be a complete readiness to become aware of what those responsibilities are before we seek funds. The platform Skip has two versions. One version is used for angel network management. This is the platform which is currently under implementation at two locations. We also have an incubation management platform, which is an offshoot of the same, which we are currently searching for potential customers. And then the entire knowledge piece of how startups happen, which is the training element, and also the knowledge element when the incubation is happening, is in a platform called Zeal, which I call as a startup school. And here we can train students from school to college to entrepreneurs actually seeking to do the business. I'm currently working in partnership with the startup group in Chennai, who are the marketing and distribution partner with me. Just to show you, the startup incubator is where we help startups start up, and it's a pure digital platform as an incubator. In Be Investable, we help startups become investable. Skip, the complete angel network management solution, and Startup School, where you can learn entrepreneurship by living the life of an entrepreneur. We have a fifth platform which is going to come pretty soon into the market over the next 60 days. It's called Capital Raise, and this will be a platform by which entrepreneurs seeking funds from angel or venture capital funds can manage their entire fundraising, starting from preparing their pitch deck to communicating their pitch deck to potential investors and then engaging in dialogue. As I will be showing you that the journey of startup funding is not a short-term one-off activity which happens. Once an entrepreneur takes a decision to raise capital from an idea stage, it goes a certain amount of dilution, which is equal to raising of external capital happens till the company becomes a large business and no longer needs external capital to grow. We always say that this journey is reasonably fuzzy when you start, because a critical element of what happens is that the founder's ownership in the company continues to dilute. And this again imposes all kinds of thoughts in an entrepreneur as to why he or she should dilute, but more importantly, the rights that an entrepreneur gives up to his investors and the rights that they possess in terms of what to do with the company if the goings are good, and what to also do with the company when the goings get tough. And this entire journey can be managed in the platform called Capital Raise. So what is the business of investors? Before I get into what is the business of investors, I wanted to draw attention of everybody to top 20 reasons why startups fail. I focus more on the fact that this is actually why startups fizzle out. Failure is a challenging word for me. But what happens is that after you start a business, you discover that there's no market need for what you wanted to do, or you run out of cash. And I want to correlate run out of cash with no financing or investment interest. So a company shuts down because not because they ran out of cash, but because they were unable to evoke interest in investors. This is an important piece of the puzzle because com companies should not fail if they run out of cash. They fail because of an inability to communicate the value of the business to investors, to make it interesting for them to invest, worthwhile for them to invest in the business. And the other elements of not being the right team. So we will be discussing how to communicate what the right team is all about, how to get out competed. The question of how you get in the notice of customers will come up in the presentation. The question of pricing and cost issues is the business model. The user and unfriendly product I will cover only at a very, very rudimentary level, but to initially introduce you to it. A digital product which underpins all businesses today. So customer acquisition of every business is digital, is essentially a process by which we engage on a screen with a customer. And if the user experience is not seamless, comfortable, easy, consumers have too many apps and too many web screens to look at, that they will reject you. So here we will come up with, if a user screen is unfriendly, engagement comes down and customers tend to give up engaging with your business. A product without a business model that you suddenly discover while executing a business that maybe there was no business model to begin with. Poor marketing, which is poor customer acquisition. We don't pay attention to customers, which is ignoring customers. And a product is mistimed. Now, the product's mistiming is a very critical piece of the pitch presentation element, and I'm going to cover this again in some depth. All the criteria on the right side, which is the lose focus to failure to pivot, are actually decisions taken by an entrepreneur, decisions which end up being incorrect. So losing focus is a psychological piece. Disharmony when between the team and investors, you have an argument and you disagree with what is to be done. A pivot gone bad, that you took a decision to change your direction and that never worked. You give up the commitment to the business, which is lack of passion. You failed a geographic expansion, somewhat like Oyo, unfortunately expanded too far and wide before the pandemic, and when tourism went down, it really knocked the foundation of the company. There's no investor interest we've covered. There are legal challenges. Some companies can come and challenge your intellectual property. Didn't use the network. I needed to use the value of the network who could have helped me do the business, and I didn't. I burn out. I worked so hard that I lose all capacity to carry on. And failure to pivot is something what we discussed as a pivot gone bad. And failure to pivot will be when there's pressure on you to change direction and you did not. So what is the business of a venture capital firm? A venture capital firm is usually managed by a general partner. The general partner invests their money into the business, but also raise capital from high net worth individuals, pension funds, insurance companies, endowments, foundations, and sovereign wealth funds. Assuming I was an entrepreneur wanting to start a venture capital fund, the first time when I come to start a venture capital fund, I have no track record of having invested in big businesses which became big. And therefore, if I go to somebody and say, will you partner with me? Well, I have some skills of identifying investments. You will tell me that you don't have, you've yet to demonstrate capability of identifying good investments. So please put in a large amount of money from your side. So when the investment fund is new, the pressure comes from limited partners that the general partner should put in about 20% of the capital being raised. But once I prove a track record, then the venture capital fund could only take 1% money from the general partners, and the limited partners will be prepared to invest 99%. This imposes certain decision-making constraints on the general partner whose job is it to identify investments. And this will get influenced in the nature of the pitching and the nature of businesses that they invest in. So we will come to know whether we should even approach a particular venture capital fund for a nature of business that one is running. This slide actually demonstrates that investment in early stage businesses is a very, very high risk business. How does this talk of high risk? Assuming that there are 10,000 startups in a year, only in 97% of all exits profits come from 10 businesses from 10,000. So you can imagine that 1 in every 1,000 businesses gives 10 times the initial investment return. Most businesses, which is 9,990 businesses, 99% businesses barely return the capital or lose capital. And this is the reason that a general partner of a venture capital fund is extremely careful where they invest money, because they are searching for this elusive 1 in 1,000 opportunities that cross their desk. This decision tree not only demonstrates the uncertainty across investments, but it demonstrates how the decision making actually happens and how failures and successes happen. So assuming you have 100 companies which enter at the beginning of the decision stage, 33% are always rejects. Of the 67% which come to the decision making stage, another 50% are said no to. And then the balance 50% who manage to cross the chasm, 70% are niche businesses. They survive, but they don't give a great return. They give just 1 times the return that you were talking about. And then once you reach a mass market, large businesses, 60% become also ran. 30% are close challengers in a market in terms of market share that they possess, and only 10% become market leaders. So it's only one company which has a revenue of $1 billion and experiences an exit value of 8,000. And this is the company which gives that large return to the venture capital. And this is the elusive company that they are always searching for. So if I use the Cinderella story, the Cinderella story is of a princess kissing a frog as she knows that one of the frogs is the prince. And when a venture capital firm is looking at investments, they don't know which of the potential investments coming across their desk is the elusive prince, 1 in 1,000. And therefore, there is an extreme amount of pressure to discover the prince The pressure also increases that you imagine that you have a fund which is going to have a life of 8 years. Now, after you invest money in a business, you need to give it a certain number of years to demonstrate that it can scale up and give a return. So assuming that it's an 8-year fund, you must try to invest a large proportion of the capital that you raise for venture capital in the first 4 years so that you can nurture the investment so the next 4 years have exits and give a return. Because if you are investing in the later half of the fund life, you will not get adequate time to get a return. And so there is one pressure to invest early once you have raised the fund. The second pressure to invest is that you have a fear of missing out. It's very difficult to say that the 1,000 investments which cross your desk in an year on an average, you don't know which of them could become a Facebook. And therefore, you have a fear that if I say no and another fund sees opportunity and they invest, then it's called the fear of missing out. This also imposes a certain pressure on a fund to diversify their portfolio quickly. And this is where the probability of return starts to come down. How this impacts decision making, we'll get into it in a bit. So finding a 10 times return opportunity requires considerable effort. It is like climbing the Mount Everest. So what is this idea of a funnel? This is data of India. 50,000 pitch documents crossed the angel networks in the country. Of the 50,000 pitch documents, only 242 were invested by angels. And of the 242, 51 went to Series A, 16 to Series B, and 4 to Series C. This clearly imposes upon the selection process a time constraint. Imagine if I have to review 1,000 pitches, decide which entrepreneurs to meet, and you meet them more than once to discover and decipher whether you should get into detail. The time constraint opposes an attention constraint and therefore imposes an understanding opportunity, a lack of an understanding opportunity rather than an understanding opportunity on a human being or an angel. And this imposes the time that angels have to look at pitch documents and to understand them. And therefore, catching attention, communicating, and making them see it from an entrepreneur's perspective is a very critical piece of this puzzle. This is an actual hand sketch of how an angel goes through the decision-making process. And why I'm mentioning this to you is that a very critical milestone is the email process by which they get a message. So you look at an email and you take a decision that you want an entrepreneur to meet a partner or an analyst. And on the other side, you get an unvetted email, and therefore you have to screen an investor deck. So a vetted email is when an angel who's a part of a network says, I've looked at this deal, this sounds interesting. So preliminary analysis of what could be the opportunity has been done by a member of the angel network or an investment network. And therefore, the process here is straight. Whereas in an unvetted email, you got to spend time in looking and understanding the deck. And then from a first meeting to a second meeting to a team evaluation to then taking a decision is a journey. But what we have to do is that through the preparation of the right kind of pitches and learning how to pitch, we are able to ensure that the meeting with the first analyst or the partner who's going to evaluate and dialogue with you about the opportunity, that probability increases. The first hurdle is crossed here. This goes without saying that the quality of preparation that we are going to be talking about over the next period of time in this presentation itself will demonstrate to you that the quality of pitch preparation also influences the dialogue which will happen subsequently as you progress in engaging with an angel. So how do investors identify, find, and then evaluate? So there is one clear way of finding is through angels who do the preliminary screening, and the other method is by going to all kinds of conferences, having a platform where people can apply and stuff like that. But then there is the whole process of evaluation, and that is going to be a major portion of this presentation. I want to highlight a very important element up front. A corporation imagine is a large building. A startup is not a miniature version of a building. What does this mean? If in a building, which is a large company, you have business processes which are established, you have management teams which exist, you have supply chains which exist, you have customers which come to the corporation, and you have resources, other people and money. A startup actually has none of these things. And therefore, the way we look upon a startup is never the way we look upon an existing company. The challenge of the pitching process is that when you pitch, you condense the ideas about your startup business to such a small deck to grab attention that you're rarely able to communicate the entire element of the startup business. So what we say, it is like a tip of an iceberg. The visible message is the pitch document, but 90% of the pitch is hidden and is assessed by an investor based on their past experience, their knowledge, their interests. So actually an investor, what we say, connects all the dots presented in the pitch document using their past experience and investment capability and their interests within the time constraints, attention constraints, and a willingness to commit time to understand the opportunity. So what does this actually mean? Assuming that you are looking out of a window and you see a garden, and another person looks out of the window and sees a building, and imagine a third person looks out of the window and sees rain. What will happen is that it will appear that these are three different scenarios. There are three different perspectives. But the reality is that these are three windows looking at the same phenomena. What this tells us is that even though the same idea is being discussed, three different people with three different frames by which they look at a business can be completely different because they come from a different background, different experience, and have a different understanding of how investment works. And it is in these constraints that we pitch. So it's critical that when we pitch, we try to get as much of a common perspective very quickly as possible. The challenge here is that of the famous story from our scriptures, that going to an elephant and trying to understand it were six blind men. Each of them saw a part of the elephant and assumed that that part was the elephant. And therefore, somebody who looked at the trunk thought it was a snake, somebody looked at the ears thought it was the fan, and so on. And I'm going to exemplify the idea of a company like LinkedIn, which in 2004 got funded when it had zero revenue. But there is also a company like Airbnb, which got rejected by a fund that invested in Lyft. Lyft is that company which is like Uber as the second large company. It has its own history of evolution. So what do we gather from these two examples? That is selecting an investment to fund a science, art, or luck. It is my view that it's a mix of both. And the more we go towards it being a science and a structure, we would not be giving credibility to the creative element of an investor when they look upon what is being presented to them. And there is certainly an element of luck, because things happen in an economy very often in an unpredictable way. The history shows that the highest return of 10 times the value comes from ideas which were actually non-consensus ideas, which predominantly people thought were bad ideas. But they became good ideas, and therefore the return was 10 times. Because assuming that it was a good idea, there would be a lot of people wanting to invest in the business. There would be a lot of clones of the business idea, competitors, and therefore it would give lower returns. So we have to be very watchful of the fact that an investor keeps their mind open to what is a bad idea, and they still want to look at it, trying to decipher if there was something in this which could make magic. And it's our job from the pitching point of view to demonstrate to a listener that what is a non-consensus idea could actually become a very good idea. So how do you get inside the head of VCs to discover how they think and how they decide? Angels and venture capitalists often give presentation in public forum, and in their presentations they do give an inkling as to how they decide, how they look at information and data. They also disclose their investment thesis on their websites, domains that they invest in, and what are they thinking about the trends of the future. And this presentation has used a lot of information that I have gathered from multiple sources to put how angels think together. And I myself have been a small seed investment person for 8-9 years in Dubai. The experience is not a universal experience because of the nature of Dubai as a city or UAE as a country, and therefore I tend to look upon that experience as contributing just about 25% of the knowledge that I'm sharing. 75% of the experience comes out of my being an entrepreneur and my having listened to a lot of messaging and doing the research. So when investors speak and tell you how they invest, you must remember to ensure that you look upon what you listen and understand what they say based upon human biases. And I want to start from the right. So if I have been successful based on something which I did in the past, I always tend to give a lot of weightage to some particular idea that I did in the past. Remember that what I did in the past may not be correlated with what has caused that success to happen. So treat that with a pinch, use that with a pinch of salt. The second thing is that an idea which came from me, I often overestimate the potential. So if I have a business which I've invested in, I will always overestimate the potential and justify that idea even before it becomes successful. We have a tendency to look upon only those positive elements which enable me to sleep at night and not get tense. And this is the nature of the human mind. And the last one is that we overestimate the probability of success of our own ideas. So once an investor invests in a startup early, they are often going to overestimate the probability of its success. The reality could be otherwise, and the reality is also proven by the fact that you first invest is 1 in 1,000, and after you invest in them, only 1% of what you invested in becomes very big. So the scale of these biases is very critical. And I want to share with you a recent news report. Now, Surge is Sequoia's accelerator program. And if you look at their web platform, you will see that they love to take startups, put them through 4 or 6 months of effort and then they invest in them. But what they don't tell you is that the predominant number of investments that go through Surge are repeat founders. And repeat founders who have already started businesses before, who have rechristened them or shut down and restarted again, are a very different capability profile for success in the future. So what Surge should be telling us, that they invest in repeat founders as a predominant criteria for investment. So how do you present to investors and what makes a good deck? At the outset, I want to highlight one important fact. When you do a presentation to an angel investor or a venture capital network and they come up and say that they don't want to continue talking to you, please don't take that as a true measure of the quality of your idea, the team, technology, or business model. It is a reflection of the best efforts that they and you put in for them to take a decision in limited amount of time and data. And rejection doesn't mean you're not good enough. It means that the other person could have, may have failed to notice what you have to offer because of the time and information constraint. And entrepreneurship is a journey. You learn at every step, and every rejection is a means of coming back, looking inwards, and figuring out what one could have done better to get a better result. This is a snapshot of an investor's filtering process. Now, an investor traditionally evaluates you on how well the business fits with their investment thesis, the one extreme idea on the left called fit. Look upon market opportunity, the scale, and we'll discuss this in some detail. We will talk in terms of how teams are evaluated and how the team fit with the market is a very critical piece of the choice making process. The team values. Now, I will bring out the idea of authenticity of an entrepreneur, the startup CEO founder or a co-founder, and certainly ethics and character, because once you take money, you got to be trusted to deliver and use the money judiciously. And then the whole idea of what the product is, and I'll talk about the learning orientation in it, which is a very important element, and how the demonstration and the whole product is a critical piece of the product puzzle. The financial viability essentially focuses upon the capital needs, how they are justified, how capital will be used, how capital will be used efficiently to get a return for the investors. When will the next dilution happen or next capital raise happen to scale or grow the business? And then the idea of technology giving a competitive advantage and network effects. I will not be covering the extreme right, the superpower element. This is far more nuanced and technical, and I will probably spend time on this during the pitch boot camp and not in this introductory presentation. So how do you go about preparing a pitch? Here I show to you that if a pitch deck is about questions to be answered, then you don't need a boot camp. You can Google it, and like Ratan Tata distributed the pitch deck, which had about 350,000 downloads or views, as the case may be, it was nothing but a series of questions. Very textbookish, but yes, good enough for somebody wanting to understand what are the things that I need to look at. But if you try to discover how should these questions be answered, it's very difficult to find. And if you then go further and say that how should I prepare for easy interpretation of the pitch document, the way an investor would like to see it, it is next to impossible to find. And I've shown here both in the 5 T's and the value stack. These are the investment thesis of 2 different, one is a seed stage company in America and one is a slightly later stage company. And what they're saying is that we look upon the value stack, which is the value creation platforms which are implicitly built within the company, which is starting at proprietary power. That does this company have intellectual property or a technology that gives it staying power in the competitive space? Does it have product power? Is the product fit with the market got established that we can now say that the product can be refined and scaled up? And then as an entrepreneur goes about creating a company, the company acquires a DNA, it acquires an organizational capability. Does the company now have a growth engine or the power to grow? And then if the company has the power to grow, does it then go and acquire a capacity to dominate a category? When a startup dominates a category, they often capture a fair large number of profit pools of the category. Whereas the other company, which talks of 5Ts, tells you that the team, technology, the total available market, which is the market opportunity, and we'll discuss this later, traction and trenches, how is the team spending time in actually winning the battles? Does this tell you how to prepare for interpretation? Not really. And therefore is the power of the boot camp. So what are the stages of investment? So just to share with you, you could have a startup, you launch it, and then suddenly there's a miracle which happens out of funding, and then you suddenly have product market fit and take off of the business. It really is not about this. There are two distinct phases of starting up. So every business starts with an idea of a value which is going to be provided to customers, a new product value. And therefore, there is a phase of funding which focuses on supporting an entrepreneur, demonstrate that the idea has value. And once the idea value has been demonstrated, it is at that stage that the business requires more capital to then demonstrate its growth potential. At a very simplistic level, this is the broad scenario. And now at a more nuanced level, what we say is that when a business is starting and defining the problem and solution that is being, which is going to be solved with the idea, this is the stage before a minimum viable product has been created, which customers can touch and feel. And this is the value proving phenomena. So what we say, product needs to be valuable before acquiring customers. So this is a funding stage, and then there is a 3 into 5 year annual growth rate after product market fit is established and channels of distribution and acquiring customers have got established. And that is the name of this game. So let's see what happens at the two stages of this business. So while the proof of principle and the proof of concept, which is the values creation and the product market fit phase, it is always the jockey which is important, which is the entrepreneur. And once a product market fit happens and growth has to be achieved and capital is taken for growth, then the people management skills and the management skills and the channels of distribution and how you incentivize the channels of distribution to scale up become important. And it is at this stage you evaluate the horse and therefore the CEO and the jockey and the horse, and therefore the CEO and his or her capability to run the organization and scale up the business. And in this fundraising process, when you start a company, you're just a rudimentary idea. You got to recruit co-founders, you got to describe the solution, and you got to validate that there is even a market need. And it is this stage which we call the pre-seed, the idea stage. And then the seed stage takes you through the core team, the delivering of the product 1.0 with a certain revenue run rate, and then you go to Series A. And in each of these three stages, the way an investor evaluates the team, the product, and the traction differ completely. And I draw this distinction right through the presentation, and even during the pitch boot camp, this difference will be demonstrated. Just the same idea in a certain more specific detail. If you are at the idea stage, at a very macro level, an investor wants to see a detailed description of the solution. And they want to see a traction, that how many customers have you met who have confirmed the insight of the entrepreneur that there is a real market pain and now is the time to solve it. And we'll discuss the timing subsequently. Once you reach a seed stage, then you have discovered what features to build, what is the business model that will drive purchases, and the goal now is to demonstrate that the market will pay you. And therefore, the measure of traction is going to be that I'm going to reach X number of customers to get a certain revenue rate. And once you cross the seed demonstration of the value of the seed investment, then you get into Series A, which could be that you can now growth and accelerate revenue. You have a team which will increase sales and marketing, and you have a product whose version 2.0 is now being created, and therefore the traction will reach a greater number of customers with a run rate. Now, between seed and Series A, there could be multiple rounds of investment as milestones get developed, and an entrepreneur stroke a business or a startup takes time to reach the growth acceleration scale. So the first tension as a startup founder is, how much money should I ask? Should I focus on profit or growth? And this profit or growth imposes constraints on your decision making, because if you are going to grow by making losses, you are going to use a lot of cash. It could be a rocket kind of a growth. The other option is to grow profitability but go slowly. And in terms of profit, and low growth is not a business which people would be interested in from an investment point of view. And if you low growth with a loss, it certainly is not a business you're talking about. So this tension is real, because this is the starting point by which you are going to prepare your pitch documents, basic foundation as to how you're going to ask for money, how much, and what you're going to do with the money, and what goals you will commit to the investor that you will achieve. So what is the goal of the pitch? You have to demonstrate at a macro level in the pitch presentation that you have the ability to raise money and allocate it to correct decision making. You know how to decide, and you know what a balanced business model is all about. You know what is the cost of acquiring customers, and therefore the monetization that is associated with the acquisition. Or you want to grow like a rocket, and you're going to manage an out of balance business model for a period of time where the cost of acquisition will be high and monetization will be low. And this balance is clearly pivoted on one idea called ability to allocate resources. And I'm going to share with you an example that if this decision is not done right, it creates major issues for an entrepreneur. Give you an example. There is a company in India called the Ken, which is a news site. It's a research paid version where funded by seed money or early investment money. And I was a member of that. And suddenly they sent a mail that we went on a New Year party to Bangkok to have an offsite. Now here is a company which has taken capital from outside. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to look at an organization whose motivation is to have an offsite in Bangkok with the capital. You could have had an offsite within India. You didn't have to go to Bangkok, really. It's a very clear sign of a negative perception of the person or the top management team which is creating that business, because they don't know what to do with the money that they have raised. The second element of discipline in capital allocation is that if you raise too much capital too quickly, it leads to inefficiencies of money allocation. And one of the classic elements in this was the Financial Times article on Oyo, where they said that when you give $6 billion to a 26-year-old CEO who's running his first company, how can one say that they are using the money right and they know how to use the money right? So a lot of investments of Oyo went into investments which any judicious, prudent, experienced executive, the non-risk taking executive, would have said it looks apparently not well thought out. The logic of capital, excess capital availability, is very vividly represented in this photograph. So in the United States, before the first flight of an aircraft took place, which the Wright brothers won, there was a competition on creating an aircraft. And the two competing teams were Samuel Pierpont Langley, who had a lot of capital, was a wealthy individual, and Wright brothers, who had no knowledge of flight and had no knowledge of science even, actually. They just had the entrepreneurial jugaad, entrepreneurial capability of thinking through doing micro experiments. And what Samuel Langley built was this boat in the ocean, creek, or the river, and on top of it they would do these experiments of flight. Whereas Wright brothers only did the experiments on land, and therefore when they actually flew, they were 1.5 to 2 meters above ground, but demonstrated what flight was. One had lots of money, one had no money. One had lots of money and therefore lots of engineers, overthought about what had to be done, and Wright brothers would do tests and experiments and succeeded, and we know who won. And that's the power of keeping capital, keeping an entrepreneur capital constrained, because then they don't throw money at ideas, they throw creativity at ideas, which is the real power of an entrepreneur. And this is why we say that 70% of the startups fail at the idea stage itself, because if you have too much of money, you scale too quickly because you believe that the business will work, and because you spend money far beyond growing the business, which could be in hiring salespeople, expensive marketing, perfecting the product, leasing offices, going on a party to Bangkok, then what happens is that you don't have a business ready for scaling. And therefore, capital quantum is a very critical decision of an entrepreneur before making a pitch document. So what should be the initial messages of a business? So let's look at this cartoon as a very interesting example. So Dilbert, I love the pithy ideas that he comes up with. How's the internet startup doing? Good. My plan is to be a dominant internet source for tuna sandwiches. So if I buy one, you'll ship it overnight? No, you'll have to come and pick it up. The logic being that you have stated that you want to be a dominant internet source for tuna sandwiches, but it requires physical pickup. So ordering is internet, not the source. So what do we look upon LinkedIn? And LinkedIn is a company, as you can see, 2004. This is the time when they're raising B series. They have 1 million users, no revenue. And what do they tell the listener? Find and contact the people you need through the people you already trust. The power of networking and introduction. What is LinkedIn? The graphic tells the viewer that this is a network of people. Why is it valuable? Because you can find people you need. How is it different? Because this is not search based, this is network based through people you trust. Simple, straightforward. And then what do? Because the organization is not making money, they are showing you the three ideas where they have a potential of two ideas of potential of making money and one idea where they want to invest money. So what they are saying is that targeted ads will be a source of money, listings for jobs will be a source of money, but the money which they will spend upon is subscriptions, which is deals and networking, making people connect with each other. How this panned out is very different, but this is in a succinct manner the communication of an organization which is not making money at that stage, to show that they have thought through how they will be making money, and certainly the discussion of how they will make money will happen after the investors who are looking at this deck want to engage with them in some depth. So what's the gambit? If there has to be a human story, every business has a human being at the supply and the consumption side, and therefore the benefit, the problem of the customer and the benefit that the startup will provide both has a human piece. And this shows that a person who's presenting is an authentic entrepreneur who has found the problem and has the insight to solve it. And this is where investors assess the true passion of an entrepreneur and what are the reasons why they are starting. Authenticity is the degree of realism, the fact that the problem is now owned by the entrepreneur and they wish to work real hard to deliver it, give a commitment of certain number of years to realize their dream, is what they are trying to communicate. And therefore we say always present the investment thesis in your opening gambit. Why would investors believe that they should be shareholders of a company? So it's not just about the problem and the solution, but what would be the value of this problem and solution to an investor if they become a part of it. And this is to increase the confidence of investors in the investment thesis that you are being presented. What does the investment thesis mean? It is an implicit below the radar belief that if somebody gives you $1, you can actually make $10 out of it, and therefore the investor should have a greater interest in becoming a piece of that dollar that is required. That is the investment thesis of an entrepreneur. At no stage can you divorce your investment thesis from your product and idea. And this is very often where entrepreneurs don't bridge information. They talk of a product or the idea or what they wish to do, but are unable to justify as to what's the value of this product, solution, and idea for an investor in terms of what an investor will discover by investing in the idea. I'm a very big fan of saying, don't ever say that my business is like an existing business in the market. So when you say that my startup idea is Uber for walking dogs, it means nothing. And if it's Warby Parker that I've created my own range of products, you can't say it's like Warby Parker. Also, I'm like Birchbox. I supply goods, 5 types of cosmetic items for you to try in samples, and then you can order what you want, or a Snapchat or an Etsy. You have to have a communication which is unique to your business, and you must have your unique message. Then let's get into the team. If the hook is the message, then this Dilbert cartoon very clearly, powerfully communicates that creating a team is not about hiring an engineer to do the work. There is much more to creating an organization by hiring people, and all of a sudden some chemistry will happen and some magic will get created. No, no. A team has to be focused, it has to be intense. We have a story that it's a reality. an entrepreneur traditionally works 10 to 12 hours a day. So they have an 80-hour or a 90-hour work week, work 7 days a week, as opposed to a traditional 40 or a 45-day, a 48-day hour, which a average professional spends in the office. So one entrepreneur is working the capability of twice a professional, and then the intensity of their execution makes that two probably become three. And this is what we talk in terms of focused on the problem and the solution, and with the passion that it deserves from you, and the intensity of commitment that whatever will happen you will overcome. So what is something called the product market fit? Product market fit is measured in three dimensions, which is an obsession of the entrepreneur founding team about the business that they are setting up and this problem that they are solving for customers, the personal story of the founders, and the experience that they bring to the startup. And I'm going to discuss this in some detail. The blue image is from a site called Napstart, which basically talks of the core core and desirable attributes of an entrepreneur. And the word here they use is opportunity obsession. Opportunity obsession results in an entrepreneur working effortlessly on product and customer issues. Effortlessly, continuously. They endure doing this for the long haul. So if you're not prepared to commit yourself to something for 3 to 5 years, don't get into it. But they also possess knowledge about the domain that they are getting into, or they are going to acquire this knowledge through execution. What does knowledge do? Not only does it give them an understanding, but makes them pay attention to a lot of detail. And by understanding and attention to detail, an investor knows that this entrepreneur is going to anticipate and respond to things that will crop up. No entrepreneurial business ever goes in a straight line. Challenges come every day. And its ability to anticipate, and if not anticipate, then respond to things that will crop up, that is a very critical piece of the entrepreneurial journey. And this is where obsession is a critical influencing variable for an investor to determine whether or not these skills exist in an entrepreneur who's making a pitch in front of me. And then the founder story is going to be the unique insights that an entrepreneur possesses, which sets you apart from competitors. An entrepreneur always comes up with an insight, something unique, something that they believe is going to change what is happening in the marketplace at the moment. And it is based on what a founder knows, based on the belief of what they have or will create, and what the customer needs. This ability to connect the three is the founder story. And what happens is that even if I don't know and I'm a rookie person in that domain, so I may have no knowledge of hardware for automation of homes, for the sake of argument. This is a pitch I saw recently, so let me use that as an example. So these are IT engineers who have no knowledge of the business world. They know how to make a product, and they have now got some customers who are paying money for the product that they have made at a beta level. So when an investor is putting money into it, we know that they don't know business, but do they have the capability to learn? Do they have the capability to apply and learn and discover? And that becomes very critical, important. On the other side, you could have somebody who comes out of 10, 15 years of work experience, and then you want to assess that this knowledge which a person already has, will this contribute to success? So this graph visually demonstrates that less knowledge evokes commitment and a determination to know, and therefore often increases the probability of success. So we say that if you're absolutely ignorant, 1 out of 50 chance of success. But if you have knowledge, then it is 1 out of 5. But if you have too much knowledge, that can also be a block to innovation. And this is depicted in the next slide, which shows that years of experience and disruption potential of the entrepreneur. So in a business which is consumer oriented, business to consumer, 3 to 4 years work experience gives the best results in terms of creativity and output. And if you're in the business to business space, you need to spend a certain number of years in the business to understand the problems of the business. And therefore, it's a 5 to 6 year journey which gives the best results of disruption. And if you're in the biosciences arena, which is pharma, and now in the vaccine world, if you have not spent 8 to 9 years in the domain, you don't have enough knowledge to disrupt it. And this is what investors look at in terms of implicit knowledge and learning capability of an entrepreneur. And as the knowledge increases, they have a higher chance of getting critical insights. If they are 100% focused on the problem with obsessive commitment, they can take care of customers and problems that they arise. And then they get engaged with customers. Customers tend to respect them because they've been in the domain already. And then we know that as an investor will believe that their experience in the domain will make them use industry knowledge to open doors and create a great product experience. But what if you don't know or know too much and you get too much money? There's an overconfidence in overspending because you may not yet have the skills or a capacity to management teams or the sequence of investment which you have to make, or the organizational processes, startup processes are in place. You may get too impatient, and then you may put money in business opportunities that don't really fit. Example, OYO in China or OYO in America, 17 hours away or 8 hours away, and still not able to understand that that makes a huge impact on decision making. What may seem on an Excel sheet like a good idea, you think can make a lot of money, but because you don't have a product market fit, you have misallocation of capital. What does this mean? A most important part is that no entrepreneur or a co-founding team have all the skills to do a business. But what investors want to see, do they know what they don't have? Do they know that this is what they don't have, and therefore they know what they need to build the team? And this is where team building away from a founder business fit, founder market fit comes in, the ability to build teams. Team building is not an easy thing. If you have to, for example, select a co-founder, it's a long circuitous journey of meeting many people, understanding their psychology, spending time with them, and then figuring out whether you will actually have a marriage of sorts in the business. And once that happens, then it's your ability to lead them. And 0 to 1 is a fabulous book by Peter Thiel, where he talks about his experience of this piece of the puzzle of building teams and leading talent in his startup. And therefore, when an entrepreneur meets investors, these are the nature of 6 types of questions that they will spend on. And as I mentioned to you earlier, if you're at the early stage, an idea stage, and you are wanting to seek money at the pre-seed or the seed level, then it's obvious that these kind of questions are going to come up. Why are you the team that should solve this? Justify that the team is exceptional. Your insights I already discussed with you earlier. What do you see in the business in 1 year or 5 years? Have you looked ahead and seen the problems that arise based on the experience that you possess? What would you do if your board asked you to replace as the CEO? How self-aware are you about your own strengths and weaknesses? What is the one reason you should stop building this company? What will tell you that now you're putting good money after bad opportunity? Probes, and then whether you have conviction and obsession about the problem being done. This often is a very critical piece of puzzle. I have also failed in getting co-founders who did not have the possession and psychologically treated it like a job, and we had to have a parting of ways. So when we present in the pitch document, you have to show who's the team, what are their backgrounds, but you have to also show why is this group uniquely qualified to best solve the problem. Because the investors will be assessing whether this team is not only uniquely qualified, they have a capability to recruit a team and build an enduring company. So that's your test from an investor's perspective. So what is a market opportunity? How do you define a market opportunity for an investor to become interested in it? So first of all, the first element is that the business potential in terms of size should be large, that the team should be committed to giving it the 5, 6, 7, 10 years to realize the value that will be derived. So the market opportunity has to be worth fighting for. Having a big vision to grow big is fine, but you always start small in the seed and the Series A stage. So the scale up, climbing Mount Everest will work, but you got to start at base camp. And therefore, an investor is wanting to also understand from an entrepreneur that I know you have this big dream of chasing the sizable market, but have you understood which is the first market niche that you want to capture to demonstrate your idea, to demonstrate your first product, and then grow to a new market space and then grow to scale up? So this ability to connect the milestones of the journey to the vision is a critical piece of an entrepreneur's presentation. And this is where the idea of size of the prize as the lexicon of dialogue starts to come up. So there's something called TAM, which is the total available market. There's something called SAM, which is the serviceable available market, and the serviceable obtainable market. So basically what this says is, this is the first niche that I want to focus upon. Then I will grow to the next niche, which is the potential available market. But the total available market is this, and very easily exemplified in the last column, that if I want to, I'm targeting, for example, B2B supplies to the total restaurant industry, then I know that the New York State has a total restaurant industry of 33 billion. But I'm going to start in New York City, where the target is 9 billion. But I'm going to focus on the tall 30 restaurants whose sales are only 526 million as the first market that I will hit. Once I get business from these 30 restaurants, I'm then now able to look at New York City. And once I capture New York City, then I will capture New York State. So the potential is well established. The journey is well established in this process. And this is how market opportunity has to be communicated. So what is the customer problem and what makes it compelling opportunity for me to solve? So we traditionally, in the value proposition thought process, we talk in terms of a product being candy, a product being a vitamin, or a product being a painkiller. A candy is a one-off product which you put in your mouth. It's sweet, it gets over. You can keep taking candy on occasion. Vitamin is something that you take, but its efficacy on outcome requires continuously taking vitamins for a long period of time. Outcome results not correlated. But painkiller, you take a painkiller in the morning, by the evening the pain is gone. So from an investment point of view, the product and the solution that we talk about has to be a painkiller for the problem of the customer. It has to have immediate, tangible results so that the customer can pay you for the solution. If it's a vitamin, the customer doesn't realize that it's going to have an impact and will pay you pittance. And if it's a candy, an occasional product, the sustainability of customer buying the product is itself in question, unless you're addicted to sugar. And therefore, this tells us, do we have a problem worth solving? The focus has to be on what customers do and therefore the pain relievers is what I do to relieve the pain of the customers. The gains that happen on a positive scale can also be valuable, but the overcoming the problem is the first key element of the startup business. And then, as you can understand, founders who have an insider knowledge of an industry and see something broken, inefficient or wrong, and have a burning desire to make the industry conform to their way of thinking is one way. It's very easy for an insider to realize that there is a problem worth solving, but when founders come and are doing this for the first time and have just come with a new perspective, they have to demonstrate that this new perspective is valuable to the customer segment that is being targeted. And this just changes the intensity and the scale of how this has to be communicated to the investor. And therefore, what we do tend to do that we focus on a big problem, we focus on the best customer to get the maximum value. And if the answer is yes, 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 then we think we have a problem worth solving. And therefore the question, what is the problem we solve? Who will we solve it for? And how will it change the world? You can now connect the dots of what I mentioned at the beginning. That the messaging is very, very particular. Importance of the problem, who's the target customer, and what's the value of that. Now, in this compelling problem, the timing is a critical issue. And I want to explain to you just by comparing three businesses on the left and three businesses on the right. Ask Jeeves was a search engine on web browsers very early on. I could ask a question and the answer would come. It got replaced by Google. Segway was an electric scooter of 2 wheels, died, company got shut down recently. Bird is an electric scooter, a ride-sharing platform, currently raised many rounds of capital. Webvan was a supermarket for delivering direct to home, failed. Instacart, successful today. So why is timing everything? The answer which we are trying to find out, why was the product or the technology that you're using was impossible a short time ago, and why does the world need your solution today? If I can answer that, I've answered the compelling question. So let's look at how we see this usually, and I'm going to give you examples to demonstrate what this actually means. Have certain technologies changed in the recent past? Is the trend line of technology such that we can use technology to solve a problem? Is there an economic impetus? Is the economic situation right and ripe for something to happen now? Is there a consumer trend which is happening which will enable a buy-in? So if you look at this, I will come to this in a minute. So if you look at mobile computing, Palm Pilot came in 1996. It was 10 years later that the iPhone got launched, and the inflection point happened after a few years after the iPhone was launched. So iPod is 2004, and then the first iPhone, and then suddenly when the app business started and the iOS became an open platform, that suddenly the app started to take it up because mobile computing became the critical piece. So there was technology was building in steps, but the timing happened when technology became user friendly and app made it even more user friendly. So you can see there was a technology piece, there was an economic impetus because people started to get cell phones, it became cheaper, and there was a cultural buy-in because touchscreen and apps made it extremely easy for trends to happen. And then if you look at Facebook, it was in 2008 that Facebook really took off. What happened? Mobile computing became popular, and once Facebook became an app which was mobile as well, people's ability to be on the platform and being engaged with it dramatically changed the story. And the second phase of growth was when Facebook expanded globally in multiple languages, that suddenly the social networking capability was made available to billions and billions of people across the world. And that's how it took off. So there was a consumer behavior piece, a technology piece, and the fact that the social media became a norm by which people could engage in, that it started to take off. Just to go back, we usually say that picking the market is a very important part of the pitch communication. Why? Because it's the market which tells us how large it is. Does it have a strong desire? Does it have the right timing? And does it give me an unfair advantage? Why I focus upon picking the right market, I will share with you in a minute. But when you pick the right market, we always say there is tailwind, and tailwind's best metaphor is that the market gives some momentum to an idea, and that adds up. So a wind velocity of 100 and an air speed of 500, which shows that the plane will actually be moving on the ground at 600. So if you look at it, this is a message. A typical founder spends their time either picking an idea, starting a company, hunting for product market fit, or scaling a company. But the most important time should be on market selection. Market selection determines far more the probability of success because it determines the pull of the market on the product. The market pulls the product only delights the consumer. And picking the right market to demonstrate your idea at a seed stage or your product market fit at a certain at the seed and growth stage is extremely crucial. Whereas tendency of most pitches is to focus a lot on what a product can do and underplay the choice of the market to play in. But from an investor's point of view, the market is a more of a compelling proposition. And to just look at it from a LinkedIn perspective, there is no effective, trusted way for professionals to find and transact with each other online. Why? Because service providers from Yellow Pages fails, selecting employees from resume databases is a failure, and professionals reaching out to professionals through professional directories is a failure. The platform gives you an ability to find professionals and transact with them online. So all the existing solutions are going to be invalidated by the power of LinkedIn. This is the why of this opportunity. And how will the world change? Because Internet 2.0, which is technologically rapidly expanding, will give us an ability to search and transact. And the traditional methodologies will disappear. And this is the power of LinkedIn. And as you can see, the trend which is happening in the world is creating an opportunity or the pain which is being tackled. And this clearly shows that if the investors agree with this pithy communication, they now know that this is the time to solve this because technology is coming in to solve an issue. So what is the classic addressable market? It shows what's the size of the price. And then what's the solution which we are building? The solution is compelling because that is going to enable you to win. So we bring the market first, the market's problem second, and then talk of how in that market which we will play in, we will succeed. That's the logic of the communication process. So what is the product? This we will spend very little time in the presentation, but highlighting what is happening at this stage. When we talk about the product, we know that products are very difficult to build. Entrepreneurs have to justify that they are aware of their product shortcomings and therefore they know what needs to be done to overcome it. No product is perfect. All products are hard to build. If you turn around and say that I have a good product, the first thing it does is create doubts in the minds of the listener. And it is this which is a problem in the pitch presentation. Please appreciate that money is being taken when the cash flow is negative. All the money is going to go into developing the product, the initial two stages, pre-seed and seed, even at the growth stage. And therefore, the prudence in saying that the money that you take is going to go into product development, and this is the things that you are planning to correct, resolve, understand by using that money, is a far more powerful communication in a pitch rather than saying I have a perfect product, you give me the money and this is how it will grow. And in a presentation, it is my experience that demos make an entrepreneur's vision complete and concrete. And to give you an example of Zappos and Dropbox, Zappos was created without a product in the warehouse. They just put the pictures, they put a payment gateway, people came and ordered and paid the money, and they had no products to give back. And they knew in a minute that the business was going to work. In the case of Dropbox, they made a video and made a presentation to people. And that's how people understood that the entrepreneurial vision is very tangible and concrete. And similarly, when an early adopter is starting to use the product and you're going to reach the growth stage and you need growth capital, then the ability of a user experience and to demonstrate how the user experience is going to motivate more people to use it and keep engaging with the product is very, very critical. And these two phenomena have to be demonstrated in the pitch presentation. So where does this take us? A very important piece of an early stage business is that the first few people who are going to engage with you are going to take a risk with you. Your ability to identify the innovators who are going to engage with you at the product stroke early stage business development game is a very important piece of the pitch presentation. So the product, good features, uncertain features, doing its demo, talking about the customer experience, and identifying the customers that you will be engaging with in this exercise. Kind of connect all the dots to show to investors that you are ready for the investment that you are seeking, rather than a theoretical exercise that I may do this, this may happen, this could happen. It's uncertainty avoided. And this cartoon shows that a very important piece of the initial stage of investment from an investor's perspective is that whatever be the uncertainty and the risk of putting money with you to build, test, and take a product to a growth stage or a product market fit stage, is that there is a possibility of falling in the chasm. And by talking about the product in the terms that I have suggested, we are able to demonstrate the fact that we have narrowed the risk of falling into the chasm. So what is traction? And this is where I'm going to spend a certain time on a very important piece of the puzzle. This is a place where no conceptual ideas are discussed. A lot of metrics come into play. A lot of discussions happen around metrics. And I'm sharing a mental model of how venture capitalists and investors look at. And if you look at the bottom, you will see a customer need, you'll see a big market, you'll see a great team, you'll see a great idea. And this goes to advisors, ability to build a product, customers, active users, retention, paying customers, good unit economics, scalable acquisition, right till rapid growth. This is a ladder of proof. A ladder of proof in simple language is, as a startup entrepreneur and the startup goes rung by rung, the risk of investment in the startup reduces. Or to put it in a converse way, investability increases. And a startup can say which steps they have covered, and when they approach investors, they know exactly at which level of risk they are playing. This is different stages of business traction, and I'm going to show you exactly how this kind of happens. So in order for me, if I'm a startup entrepreneur and you are an investor, I have to show to you that be excited in me because I'm on the right track. How do I show that to you? By showing you measures or KPIs that what I'm doing right. It's not enough for me to say I am progressing, but not have a measure to justify and substantiate that progress. And what happens is this is applied both at a pre-seed stage, and this is a graphic of an idea where you do an analysis, you create a MVP, and then you engage with customers, and if it's successful, you build the product onwards, and if it's not successful, you pivot, adapt, revise, and come back, and then go back and test the MVP. So if you show to an investor, if I show to an investor, this is my MVP stage, this is what I have done, this is what I need to do, all of a sudden they know that I'm on the right progress path. And at a seed stage, again, if I have many ideas to be implemented on how to reach customers, how to engage with them, and how to gain revenue from them, then what happens is that I'm now able to show which idea or experiment didn't work, which worked, which required pivoting, and which worked well, and I could then just focus on it and take my business forward. All metrics like this show progress. And then in terms of my readiness to growth, and I don't want you to look at the lower part of this image, but just focus on the fact that there are attraction KPIs that I'm able to generate people coming to my platform or to my business. I'm able to engage with them. I'm able to sell to them. And therefore, I know what's the value of a customer. And then the number of customers who come to me, I'm able to make them loyal customers and retain them. And therefore, I have adequate number of customers to now justify capital for growth. And this comic, I want to just get into, going to use this comic to justify a point. Traction is the story of momentum told through quantified evidence of market demand. Exactly what I mentioned to you just now. Imagine an entrepreneur is having a discussion with an investor which says, I will get millions of users by giving my product away for 6 months. Then I will sell ads and become a millionaire. How will you support yourself for the 6 months? With angel money. How much money do you have? Why? I want to see how long you can keep dreaming, because angels don't fund businesses without traction. Why does this business not have a traction? Because you say that I'm going to give it away, get customers, then I will sell ads and then become a millionaire. So nothing is proven. There's no measure in any of these comic strips. Whereas when you come in, traction has a very simple measure. When a business is at an early stage, the base of sales is low, base of interest is low. Examine LinkedIn, few people are interested, but the rate of growth on month to month is very high. So investors love this because the rate of growth on a low base is a very interesting proposition. If the interest is high and I'm able to retain that new customer who comes and expresses interest in me, then a business can scale up very fast. And therefore, we'll say external capital is rocket fuel for growth. And a small growth, a 10% growth month on month, can give me 300% growth in a year. A 15% month on month gives me 500%. And a 20% gives me 900% because this is geometric. And this is the traction that investors love to see, because they can see very clearly that numbers are justifying a scale up, and therefore let me support this investment with rocket fuel, which is liquidity. But a rocket fuel is a theoretical idea. What is sustainable lies under the hood, and this is what an entrepreneur has to demonstrate, that the engine that I have in my business is very strong. And then what is an engine? Engine is a sales funnel, that I know how to create demand and I know how to acquire customers after I create the demand. And that funnel could be any form of email, electronic methodology, Google, paid advertising, trade shows, etc. Once I get them in, I use the contacts, I qualify them, I am now able to convert them into sales opportunities. What has happened in the digital world in the last 7 to 8 years is that this traditional marketing funnel has actually become a circular virtuous flywheel. So what we do internally, there's retention, engagement, acquisition, and monetization. But on the outside, the business hypothesizes a growth model, has an understanding how users will behave, and keeps doing experiments till this circle or picks up momentum. And I'm going to define now the importance of an entrepreneur's understanding of user psychology. Always in a pitch presentation, the belief of how a user will behave based on what an organization or a startup will do is the fundamental piece of transaction. And therefore, a CEO's understanding or a startup entrepreneur's understanding of user psychology is a very critical piece of the traction segment of the presentation. It's only because I know how growth user base is acquired, I know how to retain and engage them, and I know how to get sustainable growth is all fundamentally based on my user psychology. And this, in a very graphic form, shows what is acquisition, what is retention, and what is churn. So I acquire a customer, they buy something from me, but then leave me, it's churn. But if they stay with me, then buy again, I've got a second value. And these people can keep going, increase usage, increase percentage, and I can then increase functionality, or I can keep losing a few customers. This graphically shows what is the manner in which geometric progression works to get long-term value of a customer. If I reduce churn and increase the value or engagement of a consumer with me, as retention increases, marketing cost per customer comes down, and therefore the business starts to become more and more profitable. And this is where rocket fuel is required. So imagine I just started, I have no sales, I gain traction of 15%, and then I get consistent traction of 1 sale per day. And then I go establish and I get 10 sales per day. And then I get more established at 10 plus sales a day. Acquisition was 0 or 100%. There was no retention. Then my retention got 15%, and then to 30%, and then to 50%, and then to 60%. If you recollect, the retention is what determines value. And this is what an investor is looking at, that do you know how to acquire and retain consumers? And this model, that I know how to put a cost to acquisition, I know how to acquire, I know how to get revenue, and then I know for every $100 that I put in acquisition, I have a payback period of 2 to 3 months for the sake of argument. In rapidly growing companies, that's the norm. So imagine that you put $100 and you can recover that cost in 3 months. It's a fabulous business to have. And an investor will say that, great, with a payback of 3 months, I know you're using my capital very well, and therefore you have solid economics. I'm going to put money into it. But if I have a payback period of 3 years, then it's a slow growth business, slow revenue expansion, and then I start to get worried that does this business have capital efficiency? So how do you demonstrate in a presentation that you have traction? The only way to do this is to demonstrate statistics. And I've shown here, pardon me, using the metaphor of a cricket sports field, that there are levers that you use to grow, and there are metrics that you track. So you may have a weekly active user model, you may have paid acquisition, you have virality as customers talk to each other, you have search engine optimization, you have social ways of getting customers, and the system goes on. As long as an entrepreneur can show to investors that I'm tracking the right measures to demonstrate traction and business growth, they develop confidence of investment that here is an entrepreneur who's going to use our capital well to grow the business. Just to give you an example, this is the loop of Pinterest. So as I generate more photo content, more users pin the photographs, and therefore there's a better discovery, and the cycle keeps going on and on and on. And I'm going to skip this slide, but basically this captures the entire customer acquisition piece. If you recollect, I shared with you that you've got to do a lot of experiments to acquire customers. It could be by giving things away, by putting a foot in the door and making a customer do something, giving an offer, giving something to boost the profit. All these are triggers and actions that an organization takes to engage a consumer, but the consumer then has to respond to the activity, and once they respond to the activity, then it keeps growing the traffic. And this cycle is what I showed you in the circular piece of managing user psychology, continuing to do experiments, and having a growth model that you develop. So this is the piece. Now I want to demonstrate to you what is the difference between growing and scaling. Growth happens at an initial stage after product market fit, when you have investment made at regular intervals to show that revenues are rising faster than the costs. Scaling happens when revenue rises much faster than the cost and the investment happens at one time. This business has acquired a natural ability to grow, and therefore additional investments are not required to acquire and grow consumers. And if you look at this, this is again a similar representation that when you have a contribution increase by increase of sales, you are at the position of growing. But when you start scaling up, then the loss starts to diminish and profit starts to come. And this is what I show in this, that how growing is related to contribution increase and scaling is related to profitable increase. And therefore, at the scaling and growth stage, at the growth stage, where you're taking seed investment, channel selection is a very critical piece. And the objective is that can I discover growth levers which can enable me to reach this level? And that's what they need capital for. And therefore, the investors want to know that if I put money in, do you have customers accessible by you, a demand pipeline which you can trigger and unlock if I just give you money right now? This is what they are testing. And at the 13th level, I want to discuss what is the business model. And a business model is a working theory of how a company will make money. We usually say that, can you show me unit economics? That if take the unit economics of Stripe, which is the payment platform in the US, where if I order a dinner for 31 bucks, $1.50 goes to Stripe, $8 goes to delivering of food, and $18 go to the people who prepare. And if the average value is 31, restaurant reimbursement is 18, 8 is delivery payment, transaction fee is 1.5, and profit per order is $3.50, and contribution margin is 11. And this is like a business model at a unit level. And then you want to graphically present how unit economics translates into a business. A company gives free product to customer type 1. This is giving away dollars, but then there's a premium product where certain customers come back and pay you and the model starts to work. Or you have a system of a hook and bait. You give a free cheap product, but for refill the customers come back, and both for complementary products the customer comes back. So this is basically how you engage with the consumer to buy more from you. Or you have Airbnb, that there is some visitor who needs a room, there's a host, the host is paid by the visitor, but what the dollars that Airbnb as a platform earns, it takes the renting fee plus the service fee, gives the renting fee less service fee to the host, so they retain the service fee less 3%, which is a bonus to the host, is retained by Airbnb to make money. And similarly, if you have user data, you are giving a free product, getting the data, and you're using the data to sell to another person, and the person is paying you for the dollars for the data. And if you have Warby Parker sells an eyewear to you, collects the dollars, and they also want you to feel good because each time you place an order for an eyewear, Warby Parker donates one to somebody who's needy. So there is a complete working business model around feel good as well. And so there are different types of business models. Each business model has to be communicated visually because we don't have time to spend too much of detail. But if the margins and the percentage numbers are very clearly easy to decipher on an image, a listener or an investor is able to understand what is it all about. And when it comes to the 14th piece, we now discuss investment. So it's very rare in a pitch presentation that Excel images of operating plan and financials are presented. What is far more important to present is metrics and KPIs, focus on headcount, product releases, customer activity, and cash burn, and then say that what is the capital that you need to achieve certain milestone goals. But most importantly, when you raise capital, you better also communicate to an investor that this capital is going to last for this many months. With the money that is coming in, this will be the size and scale of this business. And therefore, when I go for the second fundraise to investors again, the value of this company will be significantly higher because all the metrics that I'm committing to achieve, I am in a situation of controlling them. My metrics, the input and output measures of the metrics that I'm committing to you are well established by me and are not speculative. And what to show a timeline that is going to take me so many months to become cash break even, and therefore this is the maximum capital that I need, and it's after 120 months of cumulative cash flow break even that this journey will continue, and I will become independent of investors in the 48 months. And this has to be substantiated by the milestones and the goals, obviously in a graphical format, so they become more believable, and the next fundraise plans that you have. So what is my program Pitch Bootcamp all about? The Pitch Bootcamp is focusing on what investors look for and how they interpret and understand the pitch presentation that you present to raise capital. The program is going to focus on how to present the data to make a compelling pitch. I've demonstrated to you in this introductory webinar as to each element how it's more nuanced and more in-depth, what investors look for and how do they connect the dots. And therefore, the outcome of the program is going to be the building of a winning pitch deck, and I emphasize the word winning, increase the probability of making investors interested in your business, and more importantly, it's a boot camp, and therefore we will practice preparing and pitching to be able to practically understand that what you put in a PowerPoint, how it has to be communicated within short period of time. So we're going to learn what a 30-second pitch is, what a 2-minute pitch is, what a 10-minute pitch is in a formal setting. As you will notice in this image from slide beam, every investment community or a trainer talks of different things that go into a pitch deck, and there's a wide variety of options, but there are certain elements which are very important, which people consistently, so a business model has to be there, competition slide has to be there, a solution proposition has to be there, and stuff like that. So we will also create this document during the class as well. And then when we actually do the pitching, it's basically composed of 3 parts. The world is in a certain way, something is going to change, our product and solution, and the timing is right, and after something happens, the world is going to be a very different place. Very similar to what we discussed earlier. This is like a summary slide. And then I'm going to focus a lot on telling stories as a part of the pitching process, because it's not all facts. The numbers have to be knit together to make a cohesive whole. And then we have to understand that it's ultimately about the customer and not about the product. And it's also about working on problems that matter. So a very critical piece we said is the size of the business as it will become. What is the size total available market? A very important investment thesis of a lot of venture capital and angel funds is that they only invest in certain domains, and often they look at which big global or regional problems are we solving. So today infectious diseases is a very big problem that we want to solve. It's its electricity supply, it's its environment, is it industry infrastructure, is it corruption out of disintermediation, and so on. And this interest is very important as well. This is a single slide which presents the summary of the entire program. Making a pitch and getting funds, they seem like taking a canoe over a rapids or a waterfall. It seems risky, seems that you have a possibility of getting a no, which is equal to having an injury. But each person who goes over a waterfall breaks down the journey over the waterfall into minor steps, the way we break it into minor steps of the pitch presentation. We refine each one of them, we connect all of them together, knit them all together, and once they are together, the pitch presentation starts to work. So thank you very much for sparing your time on Sunday morning for a nearly 90-minute presentation. I apologize for this lengthy presentation, but I hope that this was okay. Thank you. Look forward to your interest in the pitch presentation bootcamp.